大怪盗アルセーヌ・ルパンが残した不思議な宝物ルパンコレクションがギャングラーに奪われた。失ったものを取り戻すために戦う怪盗、世界の平和を守るために戦う警察。ミュージック、君はどっちを応援する？
Hello and welcome to LupinRecap vs. PatReview, the podcast that's stirring up a storm. I am your host, Lokamasi, and with me is my co-host, Fefner Masamune.
You've been hit by, you've been struck by, train.
And today we are talking about episode 21 of Lupin Ranger vs. Pat Ranger. Before we get into that, we're going to have a little discussion on main characters that are introduced a little bit later into the show. For obvious reasons, because that just happened last episode.
Yep.
So I feel like there are two shows we're going to draw most of our discussion from.
I've got a few other ideas as well.
Alright. Well, the two I'm thinking of are Avatar: The Last Airbender and Dragon Ball Z.
Mm-hmm.
Or just Dragon Ball in general. With Avatar: The Last Airbender, the most obvious example, I think, is Toph. Because she is the best character, she's my favorite character, and she's not introduced until like 5 episodes into season 2.
You also sort of have Azula, because she's not really properly introduced until the second season. So I got a hero character and a villain character in that case.
Yeah. Azula was my other example.
Ah.
They're both very iconic characters that you always think about them when you think about the show, but for like a full year of the show, they didn't even exist. Well, Azula always existed. She was in the opening and in the one flashback, but Toph didn't exist.
Yep.
And for the Dragon Ball example, my two examples are Vegeta and Beerus.
Yeah, Beerus doesn't even get introduced until the third series of Dragon Ball.
Yeah, and he really quickly became my favorite character, to the point where it's almost wild to think of the show without him.
Yep. He and Whis both are good trainer-type characters.
It's like, what do you mean Beerus has only been around for like 6 years? Alright, so what are your examples?
I think in general, I don't know if you want to talk broadly about sort of the subject now, but I tend to really like characters introduced like this because I feel they're fairly distinct in a way. So of course I ended up having an example that's, not as much so, but in terms of, more memorable introductions, Magus from Chrono Trigger is pretty good because he kind of has two different intros, and they're both really good. Actually, he's got several intros. But pretty much all of them are really interesting and impactful on the game.
Mm-hmm.
And my other example is one that's forgettable in that, while you could find a lot of examples in Final Fantasy, I thought of Amarant because he actually isn't that memorable to me. From Amarant from Final Fantasy IX, that is. He is on the cover of the game, and I always forget he exists because he's like the least relevant, probably least interesting too, because he's just kind of rude.
Well, I think the main pitfall for this type of character is actually like the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want them to show up and be so cool that they start to upstage everyone else, which is what I was worried about with Noel.
Yeah.
Noel. So Azula kind of does that in that Zuko wasn't much of a threat, Zhao wasn't much of a threat, she is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a villain, so she can get away with that.
Yeah, plus it makes sense that you have that sort of order, because if they fought Azula at the start of the show, there wouldn't be a show, and would just be fucking dead.
And you need escalation of threats.
Yes.
But for a character like Toph, they just found a way to have her coolness not take away from anyone else's coolness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not sure I have the most to say about this.
Yeah, I feel like I could think of a million examples if I were actually good at remembering examples, but just conceptually this kind of character is neat because they do more or less by definition stand out, because you have to have a number of characters introduced at the start of something because, well, it's good to have that sort of dynamic. You can have solo characters, but even then you gotta introduce someone else, so when you're sort of in that exposition phase of a story, a lot of characters sort of blend together because they all have to get their start at that point. When a character is introduced later on, that introduction in of itself is separate from those, so they kind of have their own room to breathe, and in certain situations, they are also fairly big turning points for a show or game or whatever. Like, again, Magus from Chrono Trigger. But also Noel in this show as well. I feel like the tone's been a little bit different since he's appeared for, 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But he really
He
shakes
does just
things
show
up.
up and everything's different.
Yeah, it's a much different dynamic now.
Well, enough about that. Let's talk about the actual episode. Episode 21, Friend or Foe, On Board or Not.
I feel like they could have just gone with On Board or Not.
Or just Friend or Foe.
Well, Friend or Foe has kind of been done for titles before. On Board or Not is thematic, because, trains.
God damn it, I didn't even think about that. I just know, Noel asked that question at some point, but you're right. This is about trains now.
This is a train show now, so everybody get on board. Make sure you have your tickets ready. Don't fumble around with your wallet.
Clickety-clack down the track. It's lots and lots of trains.
So, after a recap of the previous episode, we pick up where we left off. Noel is at Bistro Jour, and the Phantom Thieves look ready to deck him in the face. Good Striker, however, excitedly breaks free from Kyrie's hand and hugs? We'll say Goody hugs Noel. And they high-five too. That's important. Noel then lists off everybody's names, which probably doesn't help his case, and hands a small box to Umika, bypassing Kyrie in the process. Upon opening it, the group finds the Lupin collection pieces that Noel had stolen. They still don't trust him, of course, leading Noel to do a flip to prove his innocence. Oh.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's just like, oh, you don't believe me? Huh!
Whatcha?
Believe me now?
Could a liar do this? So, I guess he also explains that while he is Lupin X and Patron X, he is, most importantly, Takeo Noel.
I'm so upset this man broke into our restaurant to do backflips and make cutie honey references.
I mean, what else do you do on a Saturday night? He assures the group that he's on their side and asks Kogure for confirmation. Kogure is there in the corner, which causes Goody to freak out. Kogure then reveals that Noel is an engineer who can alter the collection pieces, and he's the one who created the Pat Rangers versus Changers.
I really just want to see Noel in an engineering class. See, I think most people just assume that, he knows how to alter the collection because of reasons, but no, I want to see him get his degree. Where he backflips across the stage to get his degree.
It doesn't even seem like he's picked it up, but then once he gets back out of the stage, he has it.
He's stolen everyone else's degrees.
Oh, sorry. Are these yours? And he somehow fit them all between his fingers. Please take them back. This is very uncomfortable. We then cut to hell, where we get Degranio saying, "This guy," which is far funnier to me than it actually should be, honestly.
Oh, this guy.
This fucking guy. Busting my balls, Noel. Destra and Gauche are arguing over whether the new ranger goes by Patron X or Lupin X, which causes Degranio to actually get mad. He tells
Degranio just reaches over and taps his buzzsaw shoulder again.
Oh god, okay, he's just X now. Yeah, so he tells the pair that X will suffice, and tells Destra to leave him alone for the time being. For now, Degranio just wants to know about the latest Ganglar domination plans. Today we'll be following Gabat, who has been planning something at the dam. We cut over and see that Gabat is brushing the walls of the dam with a big toothbrush. And it seems like whatever his plan is, he's almost done with it. Okay. We then cut back to Jour, where the team has placed all of their collection equipment on the table. Umika asks if Noel made them, but Kogure says that he didn't. Most of the items had been passed down through the collection for generations. Noel, however, picks up the Cyclone and mentions that it's one of his. He'd heard that the GSPO had obtained some of the collection, so he infiltrated them and put them to use. Tuma gets mad at him for that remark because the cops had been using the collection as well. Noel apologizes, as the other collection pieces had been sent without his knowledge, to which even Goody gives him some grief. Noel also mentions the crane and drill, and of course Tuma gets mad at him for that as well. Noel then says that the GSBO no longer has any new collection pieces, and Kogure just seems incredibly done with him. Cue the intro, now with added Noel.
I just kind of want to point out that during part of the intro, he's standing in front of a thing that says police with a question mark after it.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of his head is blocking part of the word, so it looks like it's saying Ponce with a question mark after it.
I mean, I don't think you need to question that one.
I was like, I don't know, you tell me.
I kind of wish he was in like every scene of the intro now, though. He does have very defined sections, but I wish he was just like taped in the fight scenes in the intro, where they're just throwing the thing around.
Mm-hmm.
I was here.
He's just like backflipping in the background.
Green screen him in, guys. We finally return to Police HQ, where Noel has dressed up in a uniform far flashier than the rest of the team has. The cops eye him over, and Noel's reaction is to say that it's as though he's surrounded by no masks, like N-O-H. And it's Noel, so we do have a quick cut of them wearing masks as they stare him down. Tsukasa tells Noel that they believe he's a spy for the thieves, as he was willing to give them parts of his collection. Oh, and since he's infiltrating the thieves, then he'd probably know their identities, and yet he hasn't told them anything. Noel apologizes because he can't answer their questions, as his information is confidential, and he's technically on a different mission from HQ. He does tell them that he wants the collection to be used for the good of humanity, just like the pieces they used to fight the Ganglars. Hilltop cuts off the team's questioning, so Kaichiro decides to back off. He is about to mention something about not wanting somebody he can't trust along with him when his team is risking their lives, but Jim's Ganglar alarm goes off. Somebody's finally found the guy at Enosu Dam. The group leaves, without bringing Noel along. Back at Jure, Kairi gets a phone call. It's Noel, calling from outside the police station. He informs them of the Ganglar's location. He asks if the Jure trio are on board, but we cut away before Kairi gives his answer.
I'm honestly surprised that conversation didn't go, "Hey Kairi, it's me." Click.
Calls him back, also fuck you.
He calls him back and the phone does a flip. See, believe that it's me now?
So at the dam, gingivitis ganglar,
Ganglarvitis.
Ganglarvitis. Yes, good pun. My best one was just molar. You know, like molars, but ganglars. Anyway, Ganglarvitis continues brushing the dam. He tells himself that once his cavitries make enough progress, the dam will burst. So, clearly he's not the kind of Ganglar to think about the long term, because I don't think one broken dam is gonna bring the humans to their knees. Anyway, the cops arrive and aim at Ganglarvitis. They Kaisatsu change and start beating on Ganglarvitis. Meanwhile, the Phantom Thieves are above, relieved that Noel didn't lie to them. They Kaito change and leap down to the battle below. Ganglarvitis summons some Potamen, so you can guess how well that goes over for him. Ichigo asks Red how they found Ganglarvitis, and Red tells him that it's a secret. Red then tries to punch Ganglarvitis, but he uses his Metal Mario power-up and is armored enough for that attack to hurt Red instead. Ichigo tries to shoot Ganglarvitis, but the shots bounce off of him, and in a rare moment they actually hit Red, or at least an area close enough to look like they're hitting him. Usually that kind of thing's happening to the Pat Rangers instead.
Right, Kairi kind of sells like how much he's being a little humiliated in this part. Because he kicks the guy and then just like drops his gun to Nurse's foot.
Yep.
Then he gets shot.
He is on the ground. Nobody can break through Ganglarvitis' defenses no matter how hard they try. Ganglarvitis laughs as nobody can pierce his defenses, except his safe can still be opened. And it is, because he wasn't paying attention. Red obtains the Je me change en pierre, and Ganglarvitis freaks out. It's also worth noting that we don't know what his combination is, because that was just off screen.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize that.
Everybody proceeds to beat up on Gangler Vitus until Good Striker arrives, at which point Ichigo grabs him. The Pat Rangers transform into Pat Ranger Yugo and use one hit strike, which finally kills Gangler Vitus. Poor guy. He kinda sucks.
Had a real brush with death there, eh? Eh?
He explodes and his safe flies out into the river. As the Lupin Rangers make their escape and the Pat Rangers chase them up, Gauche appears and looks about for Gangler Vitus' safe. She removes the collection piece in her safe and swaps it for a different one. With the current piece, she scans the river and hones in on Gangler Vitus' destroyed safe. Naturally, Gauche isn't particularly happy about this and wonders if she should even bother retrieving it. Elsewhere, the Lupin Rangers run into Noel, who is wearing his very obvious Phantom Thief getup. He'd need to hide in the silver mine to blend in with anything, and even then, I think he'd be too loud for it.
Well, the good news is if they ever have to fight a werewolf...
He just has to headbutt them. The Pat Rangers stop a distance away, and Ichigo realizes that Noel must have leaked the information to the Phantom Thieves. However, Noel says that it's time to pay for the tip he gave them. He then Kaito changes into Lupin X so we can see that form's proper introduction. He then charges in firing. Noel claims that he had been helping them up until a few minutes ago, and that now he's the thief that steals from other thieves. He battles the other Lupins for a bit, as the Pat Rangers have no clue what to make of this. The Lupins do manage to push against Lupin X a little bit, so he Kaisatsu changes into Patron X. Ichigo sighs.
Drawing his katana. I do want to point out the good hit the Lupins get on Lupin X is really good.
Mm-hmm.
They basically toss him up into the air and then Red just shows up and kicks him. Then Lupin X stops himself by jamming his sword into the ground.
Yeah, but the fact that they were able to push him that far, despite that being his armored form, is pretty impressive, so he's clearly not immortal in that form, just very, very strong. X charges into the Lupins again, this time dodging their shots, and unfortunately for them, as fancy as they are, Noel is fancier. X then jabs Red in the gut, causing him to drop Gangler Vitus' collection piece. X apologizes, but before anybody can leave, Gangler Vitus is big now, and thanks to his size, his caverites are far more effective. Probably. I mean, look, big cavities are pretty strong. X approaches the Pat Rangers, expresses surprise to see them, and hands them his trains. He asks them to fight together, and they agree. X activates his X train, while Sangu and Nigu activate Fire and Thunder. All three trains fire at Big Tooth, as Ichigo decides to trust Noel as well and activates the Kaiser. This form, of course, is just Pat Kaiser Trains. Fairly obvious name.
Mm-hmm.
Surprising no one, Big Tooth does not put up much of a fight. The Pat Rangers activate the Pat Kaiser Spark Up Strike, and just kinda fling electricity at Big Tooth until he explodes. The Pat Rangers then separate and head home for the day.
Pat Rangers doomed to have less cool finishing moves.
Yeah, the Lupin's recent finishers haven't been great, but the Pat Rangers did kind of start behind and have remained there.
And their power-up move was shoot you once.
Alright, here we go. I'm going to hit you only once. You fools. Multiple shots, actually far cooler. Back at HQ, Kaitro extends his hand to Noel, though before the latter accepts, he says that he will continue to do things his own way. But Kaitro wants to believe that Noel was honest when he said he wanted to fight for peace. The two shake hands, and Saki is also excited. Tsukasa, the only correct person in this room, is still wary of Noel, but she'll put up with him. I did want to say the only smart person, except that is rude to Kaichiro, because Kaichiro's on purpose extending, a willingness to trust Noel, despite his own misgivings about the man.
Yeah, this is more Jonathan Joestar than Son Goku. He's being nice because he wants to be nice, and not because he's a moron.
Kaichiro will not give senzu beans to Red.
Keiichiro will stand in front of Red with a bag full of senzu beans and one by one eat every single one of them.
The only way he wouldn't is if somebody else were injured, other than Red. We then return to Jour, where Kyrie is complaining that his stomach still hurts, and Noel didn't hold back. But Tuma then brings up the fact that Noel had actually tricked the cops. We then flash back to the phone call, where Noel presents his plan. The cops didn't trust him, and neither did the Jour trio, and in order to gain their trust, he'd pretend to fight them. He'd pretend to fight the Lupin Rangers. Back at the present, the group is still unsure if they can trust him. Kyrie, however, doesn't want to trust Noel. He wants to use him. As we fade from that scene, we find Noel on a walk at night, collection piece in hand. Kogure walks beside him after he passes a pillar and asks for the collection piece. Noel says that he'll give it to him, but first he wants to have a chat with him. And on that ominous note, we end the episode.
Yep, that we do. Pretty good episode.
Yep. So, Ganglar talk. Of course, since I look up the treasure names as long as the Ganglar actually dies, I did look up Gabat's profile, and the personality's pretty great.
I like this because my only note for him is moron.
Alright, we're all in agreement. Good. But yeah, also something I didn't realize, but he's actually based on a hippo because his weird-ass armor is actually just two hippos. I could not parse that when actually watching the episode.
I didn't realize that either.
Yep, it's just...
The dental health theme was so obvious, I didn't look for a second theme.
But yeah, it's just two hippos with their mouth open. It's actually pretty obvious once you look at it, but yeah, that didn't hit me. But anyway, he certainly does exist. He is very clearly the wacky joke Ganglar that's just there because they needed something to blow up this episode.
Of all the Ganglars I don't know how to talk about, this is definitely one of them.
Yep. Pretty much it. He exists. I think pretty much if their treasure gets stolen extremely easily and then they die immediately, we're probably not supposed to really remember them.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't Togeno, where he actually had a pretty good plan. Not to prevent somebody from taking the treasure, just to injure them.
Yeah. I was going to say, Togeno didn't really care about whether or not he had a collection piece, and he used that to his advantage.
Yeah. And then you have somebody like Genko who did care, but he lost his treasure early, and while he was still sort of a joke character, he was actually kind of effective in the episode itself, if only because he's terrifying.
Yeah, he was present, at least.
He was present, he threw lots of bombs.
Well, enough about Ganglarvitis, then.
Yep.
The character thing that happened in this episode was small but important. I think it's interesting that Noel really seems to have shot himself in the foot for long-term trust.
Mm-hmm.
And instead just wanted to get on everyone's good side immediately.
Yeah, and that didn't work. Nor has it continued to work, despite this being like the "Hey, can we trust Noel" episode. The answer at the end is, I don't know, probably not, but we'll try.
Mm-hmm. Although I do think it's interesting that we're starting to see the thieves really still don't trust him, but the police are kind of willing to open up.
Mm-hmm.
Not Tsukasa, but the rest are.
Despite the fact that at the moment he seems to be leaning more towards the thief side.
Yeah.
Because the way
he's trying harder to woo the thieves, but I think he's only doing that because they aren't responding well.
Yeah. And, like, his plan does seem like one that would come from, like, the thief's side, because he's purposefully trying to trick the cops in this one.
Right.
But, of course, that still doesn't account for certain things, like all of the police collection pieces, his talk with Kogure.
Mm-hmm. But what I think another interesting thing is that this sort of makes him a foil to Good Striker.
Mm-hmm. Because
Good Striker formed a greater bond with the thieves, and Noel is, at least at the moment, kind of leaning more towards the police.
Yeah.
So that's enough about Noel. He's trying to get on everyone's good side, but I don't know if he's doing the best job, even if it's working for now.
It's not even working on me, the viewer. He's still done so many things that are suspect.
I trust Good Striker over Noel, and it's bad. I shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't trust Good Striker with anything.
I mean, the thing about Good Striker is he really doesn't have any, like, motives, it seems, other than just, like, hanging around and helping the collection, but, like, he does it in a way where he doesn't have to sort of sneak into the other groups. He just arrives and he's like, hey, you want to use my power-up move? Okay, here you go.
Noel's actions do give us a little bit more like character information from the other characters. And we're seeing more of, I don't want to call it naivete, but we're seeing a side of Keiichiro that I like.
Yeah.
Because at first when he says, like, I don't want to fight in a battle that I might die in next to someone I can't trust. But then he's sort of I'm willing to put myself potentially at more risk because I want to fight for a better world. And I think at least, I don't know if I can trust you as a person, but I can trust that you actually want to help the world.
Yeah, I want to trust your morals. Please stick to them.
Meanwhile, Tsukasa, who is actually going to live, decided to not mess with that.
And then there's just Sakia. He's like, yeah, sure.
Sakia's just happy to be here. Sakia would work with the thieves if they'd let him.
He really would.
And then contrast that to the Lupins, and none of them like him.
Oddly
it's
enough,
not even...
Tuma seems like he might be the most trusting. Umika's extremely, on the fence about it, because she seems worried about, just what position he's in, and she never really confirms one way or the other.
I actually thought Toma was the least trusting, because he was the one yelling questions at the beginning of the episode.
At the beginning, definitely, and I definitely don't think Noel got off on the right foot with him. Because he helped the police so much, but Tuma was also the only person to say, hey, maybe we can trust him, which is the closest to trusting that they get. He acknowledges that Noel did trick the police as well, which probably is what put him in such good graces with Tuma.
Yeah, and this might be the thing that makes Noel such a likable character despite being so flashy and cool and potentially falling into those pratfalls we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. The characters don't like him.
Yeah.
There is nothing more infuriating than hearing a bunch of fictional characters talk about how cool another character is when you don't think that other character is cool.
Yeah.
And this is a good way to get around it, is to have the character be flashy and cool, and no one likes him.
Yeah, and it makes sense that no one likes him. It would be bad writing otherwise because of the position he's in. He is openly helping both teams, and as cheery as he is, neither side would accept that.
They're willing to put up with Good Striker because they're not 100% sure what his whole deal is. At first they weren't... I don't know if they even thought of him as sentient at first. I think they do now.
The Lupin Rangers, at least.
Yeah, I think the Power Rangers are coming around. But they at least are willing to put up with him because he's not a person they can go and talk to.
Yeah, and Good Striker doesn't really seem like he's malicious? Though that's weird. Even if Noel's untrustworthy, he doesn't seem malicious. It just seems like he's too friendly with the other side, no matter what side you're on.
With Good Striker, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, in that he's just so upfront about everything.
Yeah.
He's not hiding anything. You know he's going to work with whoever he wants to work with at the time. But Noel keeps hinting at greater machinations. It's I don't trust that.
Yeah.
Stop it. You need to speak clearly or don't speak at all. Unfortunately, the best thing about this episode, I think, were the choreographed fight scenes, and there's not much we can say about those. They're really good. But I think that's all I really wanted to talk about with this episode. There's some interesting character development. We're starting to see how the allegiances fall.
Yep. I guess.
And
I just had the thought today, this doesn't really have much to do with anything, but just what if Noel did alter the Versus Changers to specifically the police theme? Was it supposed to be a full team of thieves? Also,
yeah,
I might have mentioned this last week. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast or when we were just watching an episode together.
It's fine, we can talk about it some more. I think we mentioned it off podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would make the most sense that they were originally just V Chargers, or V Changers, and then Noel added the S. And then that he made the...
And also made one of the other colors also red.
Yeah, I would think that he made the trigger machines.
Yeah.
He made some of the dial fighters, and it wouldn't surprise me if he made all of the trigger machines. But that's just me spitballing, and it might have been contradicted by certain other things in the episode. I'm not here for the main plot. I'm here for the characters.
Yep.
And the fights. The main plot's fine, but it's not grabbing my attention, really.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a dismissive way.
Yeah, like, it's grabbing me, but just, like, in very specific spots, not like every episode.
Right. I think of it as more like it's here if you want to get into this, and if you don't, it will not affect your enjoyment of the show, really.
Yeah.
Because they never spend too long at any given point talking about it.
And it's also wild enough that I can just appreciate it. Just the fact that it's about Arsene Lupin in the first place is amazing, and it only gets better from there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, short episode for Noel's second episode.
Yeah.
If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at LRVSPR. Fefner is at Fefner Masamune. You can email us at LupinRecap@PatReview@gmail.com. And we will see you in the next episode. Adieu.